Thank you, Chairman. We're now live streaming.
Lovely, thanks, Teresa. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Monday, the 1st of February 2021, and our Cabinet meeting. Got a good agenda ahead of us today. Just a bit of housekeeping. As always, if you've got a question, please put your hand up nice and visibly so I can see you. And if you've got your camera turned off, if you could please turn it on so that those who are joining us remotely are able to see who's here. And if you're not speaking, if you could keep your microphone muted, please. So we'll crack on with item 1 of the agenda. Minutes of the previous meeting held on Monday, the 4th of January 2021, pages 4 to 9. Are Cabinet colleagues happy that they're a true and accurate record? Yep, lovely. Thank you very much. Item 2, apologies for absence, Teresa or Julie.
Thank you, Chairman. We don't have any apologies. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Item 3, urgent business. I don't have any. Item 4, declarations of interest. We'll take them as read, but if we come to any item in which a member needs to declare an item of interest, if they could please do so, and we'll either ask them not to contribute to the debate or move them to the waiting room. Item 5, non-members wishing to address the meeting. You're all very much welcome. Item 6, chairman's announcements, if any. I'd have 2 this morning I'd like to raise. One is that this week I'm pleased to say that Attleborough will see our first large vaccination centre in Breckland rolled out this week on the 3rd of February. That's a fantastic position for us to be in. That's exactly in line with Norfolk and Waveney CCG's rollout. Across the whole of Norfolk, we will see further vaccination centres stood up over the coming weeks and months. And just to reassure everyone that we will get to you through the vaccination programme. We are on date and on target with priority 1 and priority 2 groups through those first 4, which we're hoping to have done by the middle of February. We've achieved everywhere we need to be within the care home provision as of the last weekend in January. So it's a really positive position for us to be in. And takeaway messages for members and those members of the public joining us: please don't contact your local GP to ask when your vaccine's coming. You'll be contacted via them direct, or you'll receive a letter in the post to call you forward. The next item I just wish to raise with members is it's Children's Mental Health Week this week. You may have seen the Duchess of Cambridge walking around the estate in Norfolk doing a message across the country to raise awareness about mental health provision and mental health, and how important it is, not just now but any time of the year, and to raise awareness, to speak up, speak out, undertake activities which you find pleasure in, which is your outreach, whether it's arts, crafts, drama, singing, dance, whatever it may be, anything which you can do just to have a bit of you time and to raise your mental resilience through what is some really challenging times. There is a phenomenal amount of organisations across the district, the county and the country who can offer support. So if you need any support, please do speak up and speak out, and it's okay not to be okay. So item 7, standing item then, Breckland community funding applications. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Leader. We have no applications coming under the community match funding. However, I just want to draw out 2 matters, please. Members may recall during January, we actually supported Dereham Food Bank with a grant of £2,500, and this helped them to secure a new storage unit. And I just want to offer my thanks to the local members who brought this matter forward, and in particular to Councillor Webb, who supported Dereham Food Bank throughout this process. Secondly, I know many of us are involved with charities and community projects away from council. So just a quick reminder that on the 11th and 12th of February, we host one-to-one funding sessions with Lucinda Leonard from the National Lottery Community Fund. And those charities or projects that we're engaged with, or the wider community, will be able to apply for funding up to £10,000. It's easy. You book a slot, visit the Community Fund website. That's all I have at this point, Chair.
Lovely, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. Alison.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, thank you, Councillor Robertson, for them kind words. However, the £2,500, which was funded by us, was matched by Dereham Town Council, which is a good example of local partnership working together, which is a good thing. The money obviously was needed very desperately for the Dereham Mid-Norfolk Food Bank, and it's because the COVID has had such implications for the storage. Well, the units they're using, they were basically not been able to manage. So this extra funding was so much needed, and I thank you all for your support on it. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Webb. So another item to move on to item 8 then, which is an update on Breckland sustainability strategy. Councillor Ian Sherwood, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. It gives me great pleasure to update the Cabinet on the continuing progress we're making on the sustainability strategy. You'll have seen from the report that the public consultation has now concluded, and we had a tremendous response to that with over 200 responses. This is a phenomenal amount. So I've asked, as you will already be aware, that the policy is moved to the February meeting, and that will come to the council meeting on the 25th of February. So it enables us to analyse the responses and to feed that in. You'll also be delighted to know, as I have already informed you, that our new Environment and Climate Change Officer, Michelle Bolaboto, has started, and it's my understanding that an email has gone out with his contact information. The rest of the report is there, Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Ian. Any questions from colleagues at all as I skim across?
Councillor Burt.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Burt.
Thank you, Councillor Sherwood, for the report. I'm slightly concerned, as usual, that we end up being delayed, on the climate emergency side of things. But okay, looking forward to this later on. You've mentioned about the public consultation, and yes, we have had a phenomenal response, 210 responses. But I am slightly concerned about the validity of what we're going to learn from that, because I've done the consultation, and the issue I had was that there's no guidance as to the value of each of those elements that you're putting in order, and there's no ability to be able to choose alternatives. So I'm wondering actually how much we're going to learn from the consultation. And you've also said in your report that you're working on some new web pages, and I wonder whether we might have a chance to review those web pages before they go live. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burt. I think we mustn't underestimate the public's involvement and concern about climate strategy. And many of the people who have responded and emailed me directly have done lots of research, have sent me interesting links and information. So I think it would be an error to underestimate people's understanding of it. Of course, some people will have a passionate and emotive response to those priorities, but I think a lot of people have clearly done a lot of research and understanding of it. I'm pleased to be able to tell you that I'm going to meet with each group, including the Green Group, before full council, so we can have a conversation with each of the groups across the council about the programme and about the feedback that we've had and about our carbon audit as well. So each group will have a full opportunity to have a discussion with me prior to full council. So I hope that helps with some of your queries. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. I've got Councillor Wickerson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a quick question, Ian. I just checked through my emails. I don't appear to have received an email which you referred to earlier as being sent out. So I wonder if you could arrange for that to be forwarded to me. Maybe I missed it, but I don't see an email on my system as yet anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wickerson. I'll check with Democratic Services. There may be an issue with the email, I'm not sure, but that information is either with you or will be with you. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So there are no other questions in relation to that. So that's just to note the contents of that report. Colleagues content to note? Lovely, thank you. So move on to item 9, which is the Q3 Financial Performance Report 2020 to 21. And Councillor Philip Cowan to present, please.
Thank you, Leader, and good morning, everyone. You will see on the first page of the report that for us here today, we are to note the report and the appendix, but that the overall report is recommending to full council the 3 recommendations on that page. The report before us today brings us all as up to date as we possibly can, following the amended budget that was presented in September last year. Now, it'll come probably as no surprise as a matter of principle. I do not eschew the concept of allow carry forwards in budgets as a matter of choice. If funds are carried forward, it often suggests there is no real need to have them allocated, and they're often seen as contingent reserves. However, as has been said many times this year, we're living under totally different circumstances, and as a consequence of the pandemic, and nailing down our finances as precisely as you'd normally expect is not that easy. Finances at the moment, particularly in local government, are certainly not an exact science. Therefore, you will see from the report before us today, we're departing of the mantra of no carry forwards in a number of areas, and for very good reasons. In paragraph 1.2, you'll see that we're proposing taking about £101,000 of balance of the COVID grant funding and putting it into the general fund. It's clearly anticipated that we will need to utilise those funds going forward. In paragraph 1.3, we're proposing a carry forward in the capital programme of about £325,000, which has been underspent this year. In fact, this year, the allocation in the capital programme was underspent by 7%, but a number of programmes that we anticipated going forward have now stopped. So as a consequence, the carry forward is only £325,000 for those projects which we are intending to proceed with in the coming year. And quite surprisingly, we're actually going to be carrying forward £15 million as well, which for Breckland is a significant sum of money, as you might imagine. But this is as a result of local government accounting procedures and is entirely as a consequence of the government's support grants from the COVID schemes, which are reported this year but are carried forward into the accounts for next year. All the details of the figures that I've been referring to are contained within the papers before you. If there are any questions, either I or Alison Chubbuck will be able to support and assist. But as I mentioned right at the start, this report for us is for noting, and the recommendation will be taken at full council on the 25th of February. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely. Thank you, Phil. Questions from Cabinet colleagues on the report? Councillor Hewitt, please.
Yeah, Phil, just a quick one. We've spoken before about the fact that budgets are not targets. They are plans and ambitions for future action. And if ever I saw a situation where it's almost critical right now to err on the side of caution and to carry forward unspent balances to the future, this must be it. Congratulations on you and your team on actually managing that process, certainly for quarter 3. I think sometimes people view finance as pure math, as numbers only. Finance is a combination of language and rules, and you are right when you see large carry forwards moving forward that this is part of accounting rules and accounting treatment, not of economic reality. So Phil, all I can say is congratulations for you and your team. This is a very robust position at the end of quarter 3 to be moving into quarter 4 and into next year.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Paul. I quite agree with you.
Lovely. I think Phil's got a broadcast going on in the
Apologies,
office.
the telephone was ringing.
That's fine. Thank you. Councillor Burt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I fully recognise the difficult position it is to predict the future, and recognise these carry forwards are an essential part of our plan. But I think that makes it all the more important that we should be as open as we can and disclose as many facts as we can. I'm looking on page 20 now of the variances, which is COVID related, fair enough. But I'm just wondering how we can get more information to members of the public about some of these projects and exactly what they mean and what's happening and where we're going with them, and the finances associated. For example, I mean, I've asked for the WorkSmart 2020 programme and have yet to receive that. So as a member, if I'm not actually receiving the information, how do members of the public stand?
Was that a question, Councillor Burt?
Yeah, how are we going to get more information to the public? And where is it?
Well, in that case, I think I will defer to my colleague, Councillor Hewitt or Councillor Sherwood, who are responsible for the WorkSmart 2020 programme.
Sorry,
Thanks.
if I may come in just very briefly. Sorry, Sam. Councillor Burt, I apologise. I have never seen a request from you for information about the WorkSmart programme. Please send it to me and we will answer.
Thanks, Councillor Hewitt. And in relation to Councillor Burt's wider question about variances contained within page 20, I think it's important for us as members, and just to clarify for members of the public, in some of the parameters which one of the items we'll be discussing today, later on, maybe below the line, in relation to a housing service review, it's us as members to set the outcome, the scope of that, the objectives we want to achieve, and the timeline we want to achieve it in, along with the budget constraints. It's then for us to then trust the officers who work on behalf of members and the public to deliver on those requirements set out within the reports and what has been either stipulated via cabinet or via a committee or the council making that decision. Through that process, absolutely, it's quite right and proper for us to review to make sure that everything is on time, on budget, and delivering what we require it to be. And I think that we absolutely understand for the members of the public that wider transparency piece, but I think it's that balancing act of the amount of time and effort to make everything open and transparent, which would create extra time to produce reports unnecessarily, to give reassurance to yourself, Councillor Burt, and maybe other members of the public, when actually the report, when it's initially outlaid, does set what is required from that budget, that timeline, that objectives and that scope. And at the end of it, it's to make sure as members that we've achieved all of those. So I think that in relation to WorkSmart 2020, that was set out in October 2019, quite clearly what it was meant to do. That was an open report. And as far as I'm aware, Councillor Hewitt, Sherwood and Clausen are overseeing that as the member board, and the officers are instructed to deliver on those objectives, that timeline and that budget. So I refer you initially, Councillor Burt, to the report in October 2019. And at the end of the programme and activity, I'm sure that Councillor Hewitt and others will ensure that we have achieved what we set out to do. And I'm more than happy at the right relevant time to maybe respond at council, because I'm sure it will be a good position for us to be in as we move forward, or to overview and scrutiny if the chairman of the commission wishes for that item to be called in to be reviewed. Any other questions in relation to Q3 financial performance report, please? Okay, so as Councillor Cowan says, that recommendation 1 is for us to note the report and the appendix, and 2 to 4 is a recommendation from Cabinet to Council. Can you move that recommendation, please, Phil?
I certainly can. I move that recommendation en bloc, please.
Thank you. All those Cabinet colleagues in favour? Super, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So move on to item 10 then, which is the budget, medium-term financial plan and capital strategy 21. Councillor Cowan to present again, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and hopefully without any telephone interruptions this time. My apologies. This, I hope, will be the penultimate iteration of our draft budget for the forthcoming year, prior to presenting our final budget proposals at Council on the 25th of February, in just over 3 weeks' time. There are, of course, 8 recommendations on page 22, but I would like to draw your attention to a number of points, if I may. Most of which you have in one form or another seen before, because, of course, we've discussed the draft budget at our last cabinet. It has also been to overview and scrutiny, and as a consequence, there have been some minor changes, and as a result of additional government funding which has come into us during the interim period. First and foremost, this is a proposed balanced budget for the next year. And as we've said many times before, it is a phenomenal achievement, I think, for any council to put forward a balanced budget against a backdrop the like of which has never been experienced in this country in living memory. It is a great achievement that is, I think, largely down to our past economic performance, our prudent fiscal management, but also as a result of superb efforts on the part of the whole officer corps and member team at Breckland who've been able to deliver this. Of course, since we last spoke about this budget, we've been out to consultation. So you will see that we have had some responses. I have to say, not to the level that Councillor Sherwood received responses to his sustainability strategy, but nevertheless, we've had some. And they're identified in paragraph 1.3 on page 23. And I suppose in common with previous years, there's been an awful lot of confusion because Breckland has a very low level of council tax. People see figures and immediately think they relate in different ways. I can recall a time when we went to central government a few years ago and they thought our increase that we were proposing was a weekly increase because they thought our actual council tax for the year was a weekly council tax. This is not the case. The council tax that we are proposing through this particular proposal equates to about a 10p increase per week per band D property. Put another way, it's about 0.01 per day on the band D ratepayer in the district. Moving on to page 24, you will see in paragraph 1.6 that we have a bit of a risk item which we've identified. We've talked about this in the past, and again, it's a direct consequence in many ways of the COVID pandemic, namely that businesses are struggling. That is not a surprise, and we can anticipate probably a higher level of appeals in the non-domestic rate market. And the fair funding review in paragraph 1.7 may well have an impact on us, but as yet that hasn't been developed, and as a consequence we are being prudent in making allowances. The new homes bonus is picked up in 1.8 and in the revenue stream on paragraph 1.9 I would just like to point out that there is a typo. We're not always perfect, but the typo is on the efficiency required there. Those have been carried forward from the previous draft, whereas if you look on page, I think it's 48, you'll see that the actual efficiencies are listed there, and they're slightly lower than those figures there as a consequence of additional funding that's come in when we've been formulating the budget proposals. So the draft budget is based on some principles which we've talked about before. There's no reliance on a legacy of new homes bonus. There are no cuts to service delivery, quite the opposite. There are enhanced services which we've heard about. We are providing financial support in reserves for projects which leads to growth and investment, because in that way we will hopefully grow our way out of the pandemic and the problems which we face. And over the page, you'll see there are no contributions to reserves to top them up. We have been able to manage our budget this year in a prudent way, but in doing so, we are utilising some reserves, but not to the extent that we were anticipating. We've also recognised in this budget that in order to deliver some of the efficiency savings going forward, our digital platform, and when I say digital platform, it's digital in the broadest possible sense, requires support. And we have had some temporary staff in post looking after that aspect of our efficiency drive. However, in order to make sure that we retain the quality of staff, it has been recognised that we need to increase the staff complement by taking these posts out of a temporary short term into permanent roles. And the budget fully incorporates those costs. I mentioned earlier that we've taken the draft budget to overview and scrutiny. And here you will see in paragraph 1.12 that one of the key aspects of the scrutinisation of our budget was to contemplate how we might be able to support those who will have difficulty, notwithstanding it's a low rising council tax, but will have difficulty in dealing with council tax in Breckland going forward. In terms of capital, we mentioned in the Q3 that capital spend is not all being expended in areas we anticipated. And here you will see the draft capital programme for next year is showing technically a shortfall of 1.5 million. And as you'll see in paragraph 1.15, that isn't actually a direct shortfall. It's as a consequence of our improvements in the Serco contract through the acquisition of waste collection vehicles and us providing them to Serco. And you'll see the returns are coming in over the 8-year period there. However, our capital forecasts do show that we have little scope for future investment in projects. In the past, Breckland has prided itself on being able to pump prime and deliver projects which have huge community benefits. We aren't in those positions anymore to be able to do that with large sums of money. We are able, however, to lever in money and funding from outside sources. But we will continue through the good offices of our commercial team to look at how we will best utilise our commercial property, look at churning it where it's appropriate, acquiring new property where it will show a better level and rate of return than any of the funds that we might be able to stick in a bank somewhere and gain 0.01% interest on those capital receipts. There are a number of papers that support this budget. We've seen, as I said, most of them before, at least once, if not twice. I don't propose to go through those in detail, but clearly we can answer questions if you wish us to do so. So at that point, Chairman, I'd like to draw a halt, just to remind you that we will get back to moving a recommendation either singly or en bloc after we've had a debate. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely. Thanks, Phil. Questions from Cabinet colleagues, first of all, please, if any. Councillor Hewitt, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Phil. And again, Phil, congratulations. You started off that introduction with the team. I mean, congratulations, firstly, on producing a balanced budget, an exceptional budget in exceptional times. And I just want people to be absolutely aware that these are exceptional times for the council, its staff, its residents, and yet we still manage to be best value of any district council in the country. We still are the lowest council tax in Norfolk. We still have got effectively a budget that allows our residents and our businesses to thrive. But and there has to be a but. I absolutely appreciate that the vast majority of the council tax bills, when they go out, will be for Norfolk County Council, for police, for parish precepts, and all of those elements. But there is still a layer, albeit a small one, £98. There is still a layer that is ours. Yeah, and you say you're very clear that it's a very small book, but it's ours. And for some people, that 10 pence a week, which is effectively what it is, that 10 pence a week increase is going to be quite difficult to afford, especially now. So, and I see in paragraph 1.12 your reference to exceptional hardship payments for those who are entitled to. Phil, can you say any more about how we as a district, not as a county, but as a district, can do our part to support those residents who are at their most vulnerable right now, please, within this budget?
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I can. This was picked up, as you saw, at scrutiny, and normally central government doles out money left, right and centre, as we know, in differing amounts to county councils, who then apportion some of those funds to districts. And in the past, we've been able to provide additional support on the local council tax reduction scheme to our residents. But in this instance, County Council has not chosen to do it that way. So we're looking at the reserves that we have in order to be able to support our residents. As a result of the discussion at scrutiny, and we did agree quite rightly that this was something we needed to look at, we have set aside about £65,000 in order to assist that. And bear in mind the support scheme that we'll be providing in the past, the local council tax reduction scheme, has been for the full council tax amount. Here we're looking at what we can do for our Breckland residents and Breckland residents alone. We can't work it out ourselves directly because of the accounting process, but we are, as you will see from the report, working with our colleagues in Anglia Revenue's partnership in order to develop the most effective, efficient and optimum way to support those residents most in need. And the paper before us sets out some of the thought processes. And later next week, in fact, Ali Chubbuck and I will be sitting down with Terry Jeremy, who brought this to our attention, to work out some detail, and we'll probably have ARP sitting in that meeting with us to ensure that we are going to do things in a way that will both advantage those disadvantaged residents without penalising them in other ways. Because as we all know, support for those in need can be a double-edged sword for some. We want to make sure the maximum benefit is generated for those most in need. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Any other questions from Cabinet colleagues at all? I can't see any, so I'll go to Councillor Jeremy first then, and then Councillor Burt next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of comments from me, if I may. Firstly, a thank you to Phil and Alison for incorporating the recommendation from scrutiny on the hardship fund. I look forward to discussing that further, but I think to get it to this stage is very encouraging. Council tax is a significant bill for residents, so I think any specific support that we can give is to be welcomed. And I think just following on from Phil's comment there, I think the most concerning thing with COVID is that it's financially impacted everybody, but impacted people to a different extent. It's very variable, the size of the financial impact. So what I like so far about the hardship fund is its flexible approach, rather than a one-size-fits-all, because actually some people need some quite significant support, others don't need any at all, and therefore that flexibility is key for me. The only question I was going to ask Phil is I just wondered if you could comment on section 1.9, which details the fact that we have a balanced budget for the next financial year, but an efficiency requirement for the following years. I always think it's a little bit slightly misleading when it says efficiency requirement, because what it could mean is increased income as well. I just wondered if you might better outline your approach and how you're going to tackle that moving forward. What's your action plan for identifying that gap, please, in future years? Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks for both those points, actually. And I would just underscore the point you made about the flexibility of the hardship fund. It is absolutely vital. It's no good giving a fixed sum to everyone. You're absolutely correct. Now, as to the budget moving forward, yes, we do have efficiencies to make, but I'll just draw your attention back to part of the report I gave, which was to say we've increased our staff complement. We're proposing to through this budget with the digital team effectively. And as we all know in this council, when we talk about digital, it isn't about Zooming or Teamsing or anything else like that. It's about the digital journey across all our services in order to make them more efficient. And that in particular is all about how people can log on, those who are able to, through the internet, onto our services to make those services very user-friendly. In the past, some of them have been very clunky, and as a consequence, people haven't been able to take advantage of them. So it's very important that we prepare ourselves for a digital council of the future in the most efficient way possible, so that we save money in doing so. As we all know, not that we're doing many face-to-face consultations now, but face-to-face consultations are enormously expensive, as our telephone consultations. The most effective way of doing things is using digital technology. If we can make the digital technology work for us and work for our residents, most importantly, then that will help to drive efficiency savings. The other areas of efficiency savings that we're looking at are, of course, all related to what we've heard before, which is the WorkSmart 2020 programme. At some point, just when, I don't know, we will all be back in Elizabeth House. And when we get back into Elizabeth House, it'll be a fundamentally different building. There is no question about that. And that fundamentally different building will do two things for us. It will enable us to work together as teams in a more comprehensive and inclusive way. But at the same time, it will hopefully have released additional space, which we might well be able to let to prospective tenants or expand the tenant base that we already have. So particularly with Elizabeth House, there are opportunities there for us to drive and draw in additional income. But I go back to the point I made about our commercial property and our investment in assets for the future. Clearly, one of the large planks of our income stream, and that's shown on the papers that you have before you, is our commercial property rental income, which is still holding up remarkably well despite the COVID pandemic. But we want to do more with that and work it harder, sweat those assets a little bit more. If we have to churn them, we will. But that's what the team are charged with doing. They're charged with generating maximum possible return from our commercial property portfolio. And instead of looking at money sitting there earning, as I said, a fraction of what we've been used to it earning, actually to generate 3, 4, 5% return on that capital is going to make a big difference. You're quite right, Terry. Efficiency savings isn't about carving staff up. It's all about generating a more efficient way of everyone that we have working, not sweating them harder, but making it more easy for them to do their job. At the same time, the other flip side of the coin is all about income generation and finding ways to drive income for the council forward. I don't think I need to say any more. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks, Phil. Councillor Burt, then, please.
Thank you, Chair. And well, thanks to Councillor Jeremy for bringing this forward, because it certainly is a very positive thing that we as a council can do. And it's I'm very pleased to see that this has been able to be incorporated in the budget. Councillor Cohen, you indicated that some members of the public were slightly confused by our council tax, and I wonder whether we are partly culpable in that, in the way that we present our figures. You yourself actually quoted, and I didn't pick it up before, but you said the same figure at overviewing scrutiny, I believe, that we were going 0.01 pence per day. That's not actually true, but you have said that a few times. You might want to revisit that. Can I sort of bring you to page 30 of the agenda and ask the question really why we're including that bar chart and excluding parish precepts? Because I think that does paint an unreasonable picture, in that even if you want to split them out and do it as a stacked bar chart, you could include the parish precepts there, and it's really easy to do because they're actually on page 31. But it does paint a very different picture, but it's a fairer picture. And I just wondered why we don't do that.
It's quite simple. This is a chart which compares district council tax rates. That's exactly what it does. So you have Breckland, Broadland, Kings Lynn, North Norfolk, South Norfolk, Great Yarmouth and Norwich. It's as simple as that. Those are the figures that we compare ourselves with. We don't have all the additional costs that we know are likely to be incurred by the other contributors to that chart. We are comparing ourselves particularly with Broadland and North Norfolk and South Norfolk in particular, all of whom are district councils broadly similar to us in the sense that they are urban in a sense and rural in a sense. We're 50-50 roughly. The others are broadly similar. And those are the district council tax rates that those district councils charge for their Band D properties. That's how we compare ourselves.
So why include the others like Great Yarmouth?
It's a form that we've been doing and using for many years. If you want, I'll have Alison Chubbuck provide us with additional information. But at the moment, that's the form that we've been using, and that's the form we will continue to use.
Yes, please. I think it would be very valuable to have additional information. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Any other questions I've got? Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, can I just say we're all Breckland residents, and speaking as a resident now, not a councillor, all these drafts and columns and highlighted graphs and things are so simple that, like I say, as a member of the public, I can't see any issues with them. That's more than enough information I, as a member of the public, would need to know. Just a comment. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Any more at all, looking from left to right? No. So just before we go back to item 10 and ask Councillor Cowan to move the recommendations, can I just say a massive vote?
Sorry, Chairman. Councillor Turner.
Okay, Linda, sorry I missed you there.
All right, Sam. Can I put a question to Max, please? I believe that the Councillor Burt asked about how we get information out to the public. I believe the form that comes out with the details of each individual household's council tax is a statutory form and a statutory way of putting it. Am I correct?
You are correct, Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that interjection, Linda, and thank you, Maxine. So item 10, the recommendations, before I ask Councillor Cowan to present, can I just say a big vote of thanks to officers and cabinet colleagues from across the authority. Budget time is an immensely challenging period. I know that you've worked diligently, not just through the pandemic, but working with your directors and service managers to find where we can ensure that we are protecting frontline services and continue to invest in the district to ensure that both residents and businesses can thrive. And being a member of the District Councillors Network as a representative of the Eastern Region and an LGA peer, I know the challenges fellow councils across the country are facing during this period of time, and many are immensely envious of the position which Breckland finds itself in. I know that you've already started much of the work for the future budget position on finding those efficiency savings or income generation and how we're operating. And I think that all of us should be immensely hopeful to what a post-COVID recovery looks like, in which the District Council will be at the forefront to be shaping both the place and the community our residents and businesses want to visit, invest and live. So Councillor Cowan, are you happy to move the recommendations in block?
I am, Chairman. We have 8 recommendations on page 22. I have no reason to suggest that we should do anything other than move them en bloc.
Lovely, thank you. So we've got a recommendation to move recommendations 1 to 8 en bloc. Cabinet colleagues, are all of those in agreement? Lovely, thank you very much. That's unanimous. So that recommendation to council is moved. So move on to item 11 then, the integrated shared management structure and joint working arrangement review, preferred options for Breckland and South Holland District Council. I invite Mr. Nathan Elvery, Head of Paid Service and Strategic Advisor, to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sam. So happy New Year to any members that I haven't spoken to or seen this year. I think we're allowed to get away with that maybe for a few days longer. So all members will be aware that back in October, for good reasons, and I'll outline those good reasons, Breckland and South Holland commissioned a strategic review, and this report deals with the first phase of that strategic review. So the 3 main driving reasons, which again members will be very familiar with, but it's worth just recapping, is obviously back in October there was the retirement of your chief executive at the time, Anna, and both leaders, both organisations felt that before they would make decisions on the appointment of a new chief executive, it was appropriate to review the shared management arrangements between the 2 organisations. Obviously, as has been referred to this morning, both organisations have been dealing with the response to COVID-19, the pandemic, and have taken decisions and revisited those decisions about moving the organisations to a place-based working arrangement, which is the current arrangements that we operate by. And that has tested and challenged some of the existing partnership arrangements across and within both county regions. And then finally, and again, for members, we're very familiar with this in terms of local government reorganisation, although Lincolnshire and Norfolk as areas haven't been invited by the government at the moment in terms of responding to local government reorganisation. A number of pieces of work had been developed across both those regions, and in order to position and consider the positioning of both organisations with respect to a response to local government reorganisation, it was felt appropriate to include that as part of the review. So those three reasons, some out of choice and some out of necessity, commissioned a piece of work that started back in October. And this is the first stage again. So just to remind members, the three stages that we proposed to do this piece of work under. The first was, and is subject to this report, which is to evaluate a preferred option for both organisations and take that preferred option as a signal of direction to both councils, which will take place on the 24th and 25th of February. Stage 2, subject to that preferred option being developed out, would be a separate set of decisions associated with a business case to deliver that preferred option. The preferred option, of course, being a new local strategic partnership. And then a third decision required by council to follow after the business case approval would be to implement those decisions. So I want to give members of the Cabinet and wider members at this point reassurance that the decision that's being asked for, the recommendations, deal with that first stage and that first stage only. So set out in the detail of the report, you'll see the process for and criteria for assessing 4 options. Those 4 options that we've assessed are the as-is position, opportunity to develop the existing partnership, an option for standalone authorities for both councils, or an option for a new local strategic partnership for both authorities. And you'll see in the detail of the criteria and the weighting to that criteria that the sequence and order for both organisations, so in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4 options, the first preferred option priority for both organisations was a new local strategic partnership, followed by a standalone authority, followed by developing the existing partnership, followed by as is. And although the scores are slightly different, reflecting the political direction and priorities for each organisation, the order of those options are in identical sequence. So as you all know, South Holland have already made their referrals onto their council meeting, and decisions were taken at their Cabinet last week, and it was unanimously agreed at South Holland to support the preferred option as is outlined in this report. So there are 3 recommendations in the paper, but there is a 4th that has been circulated to members. My apologies that was circulated late, but as we are developing and adapting to the complexity of this piece of work, there was a need to circulate a further recommendation. So I'll just go quickly through the 3 recommendations, and at that point, after the recommendations, I will pause and take any questions. So the first decision, and these are all decisions that are being referred to council on the 25th as the decision-making body. So the first is to approve the preferred option of a new local strategic partnership for Breckland, for the reasons set out in the report and the evaluation set out in the report. Flowing from that is a decision, and this word sounds very final, but it's a word, so you'll forgive me for using it, that is set out in the memorandum of agreement, to terminate the existing arrangements between yourselves and South Holland. And within the memorandum of agreement, there is a set of responsibilities to each organisation that are honoured at the point of which termination is triggered. So on terminating that, what we're recommending as a recommendation to council is the timeframes associated with that are delegated effectively to the leader of both organisations in consultation with Cabinet and taking advice, so that the memorandum at the moment is quite fixed on a 6 months timeframe, which would sound very final. So if we can go a little bit faster than we envisage, then we can bring that forward. And if for reasons, and good reasons, that are mutually agreed between both organisations, we just need to go a little bit slower, then obviously that can be flexed as well, rather than having a very definitive time frame. So when the memorandum of agreement was put together between both organisations some time ago, it's very clearly sets out and envisages the responsibility and obligations to each organisation. I have to say credit to both organisations for the thoroughness of the memorandum of agreement, because it sets out very clearly the responsibilities that you have to each organisation. And of course, that recommendation would honour those obligations. And then flowing from that recommendation is the need to position both organisations in structural terms. So what's set out here in the paper is an interim draft structure for both organisations that is designed to give members reassurance and comfort that both organisations would be able to function effectively as a standalone authority up to the point of which you would take your standalone position into a new partnership moving forward. And the reason for doing that is to enable us to informally engage with staff, which we have been doing so over the last few weeks. And I'll outline that in a little bit more detail in a second, just in terms of how we ensure that we can deliver both of those structures effectively for both organisations in a reasonable and effective time frame for you. And then finally, and flowing from that, in order to make that happen as quickly as we possibly can, for reasons of responding to potential anxieties from staff around structure changes and recognising the challenges that both organisations are responding to at the moment, but also making sure that we have sound practice and principles that we adopt as we apply that structure. We're recommending that, subject to only minor changes following consultation, that's delegated to the head of paid service to implement on your behalf. So those 4 recommendations collectively will allow us to move forward and position both organisations to be able to take forward the preferred option that is the subject of recommendation 1. And I'll pause there, Chairman, and take any questions at this stage rather than carry on with the introduction.
Lovely, thank you, Nathan. Before I open up to questions from the floor, I just want to set out and just expand on the points you raised, that events, this is a position of where we are due to the pandemic, and both localities developing a place-based officer team to respond at pace with a dedicated resource through the pandemic. And I think that was the right thing to do. That's best practice when you come to any civil or emergency position. And that's proven the test of time through where we are today, nearly 12 months on. And of course, as Nathan mentioned, the retirement of our outgoing chief executive. Both of those together, I think, form the catalyst for us to, when reviewing the partnership, to actually work out what is best for the future of the residents and businesses of Breckland. And as the report quite clearly lays out, is for us to look for a strategic partner and partnership worker within our geographical location of Norfolk. And over the decade the partnership's been working. What a fantastic partnership it's been, and my absolute thanks to all the officers who are still with us and those who have retired and left the organisation for making it so. This, as Nathan said, this is one of the first in the country, and still the first, in which 2 district councils or 2 councils have formed a strategic partnership across 2 different geographical locations, whilst making it work, delivering those efficiency savings to protect the public purse and achieve everything we've set out to achieve. And at no point is this a reflection on the officers or the members and a failing of the partnership. It is very much just a new opportunity for us in the light of COVID, for us to look very much to the county of Norfolk for what the future could look like in relation to local government. And if Cabinet is minded to support the recommendation to Council, and through the consultation process, if Council are in agreement, we will have an interim structure in which Breckland can get itself match fit for future partnership work in either at a strategic level or services across the local authority, to ensure that once again we're getting the best rate and value for the taxpayers of Breckland. And just want to thank again all of those colleagues within the chamber who made that possible. It was a difficult negotiations some 10 years ago. South Holland wasn't the first choice. In fact, that was a right of art position. We were initially looking at partnership within the county of Norfolk, and members are at the forefront of that through the process which Nathan has highlighted today, going to make sure that you're getting what is required for the district. And just on the final piece in relation to the MOU, both Gary and myself, Law Porter, have absolute mutual respect and trust for both authorities moving forward. And as we begin to detangle ourselves and get interim place-based structures, we have a moral obligation to each other and as councils to ensure that both authorities are not left, or sorry, any single authority is not left high and dry, that if any single authority needs a service, that each one will continue to provide that until set time as they can find that elsewhere or establish their own service team within their locality. And I think that just goes to show the professionalism, respect and trust which we have to each authority through this process. And I think it just goes to show that we are not leaving on a negative position at all. In fact, we are stronger now than possibly we have ever been in our political relationships. So on that, I'm more than happy to take questions from colleagues, Cabinet colleagues first. Any questions or comments? I've got Councillor Sherwood, please, then Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Leader. I just really wanted to thank our Head of Paid Service, Nathan Alvery, for this report. I was lucky enough to be involved when the partnership was formed a decade ago, but I felt the report explains how we got to where we got to and how we find ourselves where we are today. And I would just want to back up what our leader has said. The truth of the matter is that this has worked where many have failed across the country because of trust. Trust between the two leaders, whoever they are at the time, and trust between the councils. The staff have worked together. This has enabled us to save many, many hundreds of thousands of pounds that we've been able to redirect to frontline services and to support our local residents. And I think the sign is here that we're looking at separating from this, but we've still got a tremendous amount of trust and we will continue to work together with our neighbours. And I would like to just conclude by thanking Nathan again. It's a very clear report, and I think any new councillor who wasn't around or wanted to understand, all the information is there. Thank you very, very much.
Lovely, thanks, Ian. I've got Councillor Hewitt next, then Councillor Webb, then Councillor Cowan, please.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you, Nathan, for this report. At the end of the day, I think many people think the natural state of a local council is to stay as is. I fundamentally disagree with that. In order to allow our residents, our businesses to continue to thrive, we've got to look to the future and not just think back in terms of the past. We've got to think how we work collectively, both as residents and also us as a council, as communities and societies change over time. Chair, we've already seen this morning how the change in our community and the relationship with society impacts on us working with the environment, and we're making inroads there. We've seen how the change impacts on us working within our finances and within our budget and the impacts there. We've seen how this change impacts on our ways of working with IT, with AI, with Work Smart 2020, and having a council that is fit for the future around there. And now this report just lays out the impact on who we are and who we choose to work with and what is best for the future, both in terms of the near term and the long term, as we continue to adapt. As this, I think, is a fundamental step forwards in our adaptation as a council to be relevant for our residents, relevant for the community, and relevant for the future. Thanks, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Webb, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to express my thanks to Nathan as well for the report. I found it very easy to read, which is a good thing for me. Can I ask about the savings of the partnership, what the savings have been and the cost of the interim place-based structure, please?
So in terms of the savings, Alison, I think you've had regular reports over the years, which was always a good sign when you've done regular updates and reviews. So when the partnership first reported back in 2015, I think savings that have been delivered at that point in time across the partnership were 4.4 million, with ongoing savings of £500,000 a year as a consequence of continuing with the existing partnership that you have. So over the life of the partnership that's been in place, on average, you've achieved £740,000 savings for your residents and local communities per year. And obviously those savings continue to be in your base. They're not new savings now, but they continue to be in your base as a consequence of the arrangements that you have in place. And I think when you see the evaluation as set out in the criteria, you will see that there is strong evidence to suggest that in a new local strategic partnership, where that would be closer to home in the sense of a partnering authority nearer to you, that there's a belief that once that new partnership conversation happens and moves forward, that there are further saving opportunities and efficiencies and effectiveness that can be achieved together. So you'll see both that was always a strong criteria for the reason for entering into a partnership in the first place, and that has been delivered, and it certainly remains a strong criteria for moving forward into the future. Just remind me of your second part again, my apologies.
Okay, that was about the interim structure, the cost of the interim structure.
So sorry, my apologies for not remembering it. So the cost of the interim structure is no more than the existing base budget cost that you have at the moment. In fact, there is a little bit of saving there moving forward. Say a little bit of saving. We're still to finalise all of the safe landing spaces for staff as we move forward between the two organisations, but we've got a good basis for doing that moving forward. There is an assumption that's made within that, which is of course the assumption of moving forward without a chief executive appointed at this point in time, but the structure is affordable as set out based within your existing budget, so it's not costing you any more than your existing budget baseline.
Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Cowan, then Councillor Bambridge, please.
Thank you, Leader. A few points have been made, which I think bear a little bit more expansion. When we started this journey, and it was about 12 years ago, we realised very quickly that without trust, things were never going to happen, which is how we ended up with a very secure relationship with South Holland, because trust certainly underpinned that. Since then, as you've heard, we've made significant savings. We've had a phenomenal relationship stretching across county boundaries. But right now, the opportunity is there because of a changed landscape in various ways to do things differently. And what we can do as a council is bring to a new strategic partnership not only the knowledge that we are trustworthy, that we do things when we say we'll do them, in the way that we say we'll do them, and deliver the savings that we say we'll deliver. But also we have significant knowledge base now. Knowledge base which wasn't there 10 years ago, and which took two local district councils sitting 50 odd miles apart, some considerable time to work through and deliver. And by proving that it would work, guess what? The rest of the country rapidly caught up with us. And followed some of the models that we'd set up. So I think this is a huge opportunity now, given the changed landscape that we find ourselves in, to be able to build upon that knowledge base, build upon the experiences, the trust, the working arrangements, and the partnerships that we formed during the last 10 years to deliver something even better and stronger for our residents here in Norfolk, and not just Breckland residents, but residents in a partner district in the county of Norfolk, to take us into the next 10 years and beyond. It's a remarkable achievement for a small district council tucked away in rural Norfolk to have been able to set those parameters for others to follow. And I see this as the next step in our stepping up our game in order to show others how to do things maybe slightly better. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Bambridge.
Yes, thank you, Sam. I I think some of my colleagues have still much of my thunder, but what I do want to say, as somebody who was in this from day one, as I know others in this room were, and as Nathan indicated in his presentation, this has been a unique relationship. It's not been duplicated. It has been innovative, but as Councillor Cowan just said, it has led many others to follow along a very similar path. Where we've led, others have trod. The arrangement is, of course, as indicated by what everyone has said, been extremely successful to both parties. And this is, in yet another way, it's totally unique. We leave the partnership, if we do in fact leave the partnership, it's a council decision, as you have said, as very, very good friends with South Holland. And that's something that will go on for a long time. I think, as everybody has said, this has been brilliant for us as a district. It's been brilliant for our residents in that whilst they may not have seen too much, they have all experienced the advantages that come from it. And of course, the extreme saving in money, which Nathan underlined. I say well done to everybody who promoted it in the early days. And thank you for allowing us to be involved in it. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Clausen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This should not have succeeded at all, because there we are, different counties. We've got one council where everything is virtually in-house. We've got another council where a lot more is outsourced. And it only succeeded because we had the right leaders in place at the right time. Two leaders that completely trusted each other and made a complete success of it. And I think that's really lucky if you've got the right leaders in the right place at the right time. And I think we're equally lucky at this moment in time, because I think what our leader is doing at the moment places us in a really, really good position. And the trust that was there in the beginning is there now. And that is no mean feat. And I think we have got every chance of making this another hugely successful step in Breckland's history. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Paul. I've got Councillor Wickerson, please, and then Councillor Burt.
Sorry, Chair, I did not raise my hand, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Councillor Burt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Having read the report, I've got four basic questions, which we'll go through. The report we seem to be distilling down a qualitative measure into a single integer quantity, but that's not quite the way that maths works in the sense of what we're trying to achieve here. So I'd like to, as question one, where did the methodology for this assessment come from? Now, the report itself contains quite a lot of sort of management speak, collective ambition, pioneering spirit, transformation initiatives. It's said a lot about how well it's all gone, but there doesn't seem to be very much in the terms of the balancing side of that, and I sort of thought that was missing. But crucially, and this is question two, where is the data and the evidence to make the assessments? Because I can't see that in the report. Now, the political weighting is so significant that it actually swamps the options appraisal. I think it's crucial that we understand how these parameters affect each other when you're just multiplying numbers together. Now, I think there are problems with this methodology, but if you do accept the result, as portrayed, how did we get into a position as a council, or the two councils, where the as-is position is so appalling relative to the standalone position? I mean, we're talking about huge difference in the scoring scheme, which is why I can say, relative, one would be appalling to the other, because it's like 50%, or half is good. And so that's sort of, where did we get to would be my third question. My fourth question, there's no mention of what the new local strategic partnership might be, and yet we've been able to score it. How does that work? And perhaps to you, Sam, there was a report back in 2016 that said that the unitary idea for Norfolk could save up to £29 million for taxpayers across Norfolk. Is that now being considered as part of this new strategic partnership?
Thanks, Councillor Burt. Nathan, if you answer questions 1 and 2, and I'll try and box off the political questions on 3 and 4.
So in terms, Tim, in terms of the methodology that's been applied and developed for the criteria, I think that's a mixture of things, and I guess it draws from 3 crucial areas. One is the ambitions that are set out in the organisation's own corporate plan. So what are the things that are important and have been important to the organisation for some time? So obviously, if we're looking at making sure that the options that are recommended are options that deliver what you are already saying are the priorities to your communities, it should reflect that in terms of the priorities and criteria that it's judged by. And you'll see that weighted in terms of the internal criteria. In terms of the second influence to those, when you've taken decisions in setting up the partnership back in 2010 and reviewed that in 2015, there undoubtedly was a set of debates and conclusions drawn from the principles and criteria that you would use in setting up the partnership that you have at the moment and to date. And it draws upon those criteria that would have been debated at the time and the priorities that you would have set out for your organisation at that point in time as well. So again, familiar criteria have been pulled forward and used to help make that judgment. And then the third, and perhaps as equally as important, because it's been mentioned a number of times, isn't it? But I'll phrase it in a slightly different way. That it's not the strongest of species that survive, it's those that can most adapt to their environment. So the other factors that have been included to evaluate is those things that will help you as an organisation adapt to the environment that you are in. And the current example would be, responding to the pandemic and how that means that you work with local partnerships and closer to your local communities, and the potential of the environment that you would be in. And you've just mentioned that in your subsequent question to the leader around things like local government reorganisation and making sure that the criteria that's used there helps you make those decisions. So that's where the criteria has come from. We've then challenged that criteria through conversations that we've had with the Cabinet, and I expect that criteria to be challenged as we move through to overview and scrutiny conversation as well. But that's where we've drawn it from. And then I guess my experience, having been chief executive for nearly a decade in other organisations and working across local government, just the things that I think as strategic advisor you should take into consideration as you map and plan out the future of your organisation. So that's the methodology that's come from that. In terms of the challenges, there's a lot of detail that supports the report and isn't appended to the report at the moment, but there's a lot of detail that draws upon. So why would you evaluate one of these options or some of these options a higher score than the others? And what's the evidence that sits behind that? So there's a detailed piece of work that sits behind that puts value and quantitative data to those evaluations that you see in qualitative terms that are contained in the report. If I can draw all members' attention to table 7 and just distinguish between the options appraisal and the weighted score, again, to give members reassurance and to respond to Tim's question directly. So you'll see in terms of the option appraisal scores for each of those options were in the same order as is being recommended, and therefore the preferred option is being recommended in this report. The weighted score will help both organisations as we move forward. Not only does it give an emphasis to those criteria, but it also means in terms of the weighting that's been signalled as those options would be taken forward to develop a new local strategic partnership. It also gives a direction and indication to future partners what would be important in this case for Breckland as we consider the priorities and preferences for any new local strategic partnership. So whilst the political weighting is there to help influence the scoring for this report, it's also there to help influence the direction for new local strategic partnerships being developed. But as you'll see, in terms of the option appraisal score, the preferred option from that baseline was also a new local strategic partnership. So hopefully that's picked up your questions, Tim. I'm happy to respond to any others if there's any more thoughts that come from that before the leader responds.
Lovely, thanks, Nathan. Just to give some further clarity, fundamentally, I think the member may have a misunderstanding of maths here. If 3 people are asked a yes/no question and 2 people say yes, it doesn't mean the no's are worth 50% of the yeses. These are evaluative criteria, not quantitative. And I'm confident that the activity which both councils has undertaken, both cabinets in both councils has undertaken, is right and proper and has given us a good position and the foundations of where we are today for this recommendation from cabinet to council. In relation to why suddenly now, Councillor Burt, do we find ourselves in this position, is because prior to an international pandemic, everything was working immensely well. And of course, through the structure and the partnership, it was a 60-40 split as per the MOU. But of course, our officers didn't operate like that. They worked to the effect of what was required in both localities. But through the pandemic, of course, we have a place-based team, and our officers at all levels are dealing with the Norfolk Resilience Forum, working across the blue light services, the health service, making sure that we can respond at pace to all the national concerns, issues which are emerging, to daily and weekly strategic and tactical coordination groups, ensuring that our strategic and operational response to the pandemic, to Brexit, to other areas across the county are happening at pace. A dedicated Norfolk Health and CCG Forum in which our officers are attending, to dedicated Norfolk Chamber of Commerce, to the New Anglia LEP, to Norfolk Police, to so many other bodies which are very much focused on Breckland and Norfolk to date, in which our officers are quite rightly 100% focused on, and as such we are getting a suitable level of support for residents and businesses. Now before then, they were quite able to operate across 2 strategic geographical locations. But of course, I'm sure none of us have the ability to have 2 separate conversations about the same agenda item, but in 2 geographical locations in which the response, because of resource, both financial and officer, is completely different. So the position of why cabinets have decided that the sharing at this time isn't suitable is because we are in this moment in time. We are drawing to the middle end of a national pandemic in which we as Breckland are now very much focused on the recovery of our communities and places. And as such, we need to be focused on the recovery for Norfolk and what that looks like, using our Norfolk resources to make sure we get the best for residents and businesses. And in relation to your question about the question around unitary, that question now has been kicked into the long grass. The emergence of the local government reorganisation white paper has been put on the shelf for some time. However, I think that all of us within the local government family are open to anything in which it improves the service delivery for residents and businesses and finds efficiency savings. And if the moment in time comes where government offers suitable proposals, I hope that everyone across Norfolk within the local government family and residents and businesses will engage in that process wholeheartedly. Any other questions?
Could I come back, please? Because there's a couple of things.
Councillor Burt, just if I could ask, this is a cabinet recommendation to council, and if you want to scrutinise any of the responses, would it be possible for them to be done over in scrutiny rather than this meeting here?
That's one of the things I'd like to request, please, of Mr. Elvery, is that you'd indicated that there were some appendices with the evidence and data. Could those be brought to overview and scrutiny, please, so that we could actually see those?
Of course.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So I've got Councillor Wickerson, please, then Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Chair. I totally understand and agree with the principle of keeping any potential new partnership within Norfolk. It makes strategic sense, it makes common sense, it makes a lot of sense. Well, the question I guess I had was with regards to the scoring of the new local strategic partnership, was that in any way influenced by a particular partnership within Norfolk, or was it just a general comment that any other district in Norfolk would bring that result? Because we have muted in the past relationships with local councils in the sense of being on our doorstep, in other words, North Norfolk or West Norfolk, etc., etc. Was any particular district taken into account in coming to that score, that it would be more beneficial for us to have a strategic partnership with that particular district than another district within Norfolk? Thank you.
So it was deliberately scored on the basis of an objective view of a new local strategic partnership without being targeted on a specific partnership, so that it enabled the opportunities to be explored that you would take in. And I think has been referred to earlier, you are a mature partner with lots of wisdom and experience, having developed and lived through an existing partnership that you have. So looking at what you would want to achieve through a new local partnership and what the capabilities of a new local partnership should be able to give you, it was objectively assessed from that position, which enabled then a benchmark to be set about how you would enter those conversations with the potential for a new local strategic partnership, dependent upon the organisations or the organisation that you may be wanting to talk to.
Thank you, Nathan. That makes it clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Councillor, Crumbs, need to go back to my list. Who was next? Councillor Morton next, then, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I welcome the opportunity that probably COVID has given us to look again at the relationship we've got with South Holland and move on. In particular, I think it'll reduce the amount of commuting that a number of officers do, which will be a good thing. I would just like if Mr. Overy could expand a little bit on terms of the Appendix 1 and 2, where it shows the rating scores, and if you could expand a little bit how you judge effectiveness and efficiency to be 1 as is, and then in the new local strategic partnership you score them as 3. Maybe this will come out in the appendices, but if you could expand it, I'd be grateful.
So and again, I think it's been referred to earlier, so I'll paraphrase what was said earlier, and forgive whoever I'm quoting, because I can't remember. That I think what you've described in operational terms is that in your existing arrangements you have 2 quite different operating models. So you have one partner that has a number of in-house services and a strategic partner with PSPS, and you have within your own organisations a multitude of partnerships across. And I think probably my philosophy words would be what works. So where you've been able to develop good partnership working with numerous partners, your baseline for how you work has been more commercial and more transformational in that regard. And therefore you have numerous partnerships that you've developed across the region and in partnership with other organisations within the region, and in some cases slightly outside of the region. So in terms of the evaluation of the as is, it largely reflects the fact that actually within the existing partnership, you've achieved what you can achieve within the existing partnership, and to achieve more in the efficiency and effective space doesn't mean it's not possible, but it means that it would require some quite big changes in terms of your operating model that exists within the 2 partnerships. Whereas comparing that to a new local strategic partnership, you've got the opportunity to re-baseline that position and build upon your existing partnership relationships that you have across the county. So in terms of the Anglian Revenues Partnership, that's a good example of what's different between the existing partnership arrangements, but would be a good building block to incorporate new partnership arrangements as you move forward. So that's why it reflects difference of objective scoring there, because one is saying, you've largely been successful, as I referred to earlier, in achieving those savings and efficiencies that you've already recouped and delivered for your residents and local communities. Whereas a new partnership will give you that opportunity to revisit that as you started to negotiate those partnership opportunities moving forward.
Lovely, thank you. I can't see any further questions at all from Cabinet colleagues or wider members. So can I ask for a Cabinet member to move the 4 recommendations contained within the report. So you've got recommendation 1 to 3 and the subsequent recommendation, which was sent by Democratic Services and presented by Mr. Elvery. I can see Councillor Clausen moving those recommendations. Thank you. Cabinet colleagues, all those in favour? Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. That's unanimous. Lovely. Thank you very much, Nathan, for that.
Thanks,
Okay,
Chairman.
item 12 then. Date of the next meeting. To note that the meeting will be held on Monday, the 22nd of March at 9:30 via Zoom. Item 13, which is to exclusion of the press and public, for Cabinet colleagues to consider that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 1, 2 and 4 of the schedule 12A of the Act. Can I have someone who can move that recommendation, please? Okay, thank you, Phil. And all those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried. So item or part B then, items which the press and public are excluded. We'll just wait for the meeting